Hey guys, so I'm teaming up today again with Megan at Snips and Snails. I'm going to throw her channel up here and also put a link below. Last week we talked some budgeting stuff. Last week I talked about grocery budgeting. She talked about cash and envelope systems and just a general overview of budgeting, which was really insightful, really helpful. I definitely recommend checking out her channel. Today she's going to be talking about some miscellaneous topics, including homeschooling, and I know next week she's also going to hit homeschool budgeting pretty hard. So make sure you check out her channel. So today's video is going to be homeschool budgeting tips, and these are just general guidelines, tips to keep you within whatever your budget happens to be, because everybody's budget is different. So these are just some tips that I've compiled and thrown together off the top of my head, and I would love to hear what some of your top homeschool budgeting tips are. If you will leave those in the comments below so that other people can go through and see other tips besides just what has worked for our family and what I've put together here. So I am going to reference my list because it's just like 15 fast tips that I didn't want to forget when I was jotting them down at the dentist office with my son. So the first one, these are in no particular order, but I will say that this one is my number one tip, and that is stop looking if it's not in your budget. So for me, there are just certain times, or there have been certain seasons, like when we first started homeschooling and we just had to purchase everything new. Like when you've got the kindergartner or the first grader and you're buying everything new every single year, versus once you already have a good stockpile of stuff and you're only buying a few things for the school year, where I just couldn't read blogs. That was, I guess, before like homeschooling on YouTube was super popular, or I hadn't found a lot of videos. It was all on blogs. And I just was like, no, Abby, don't even click that, because then you're gonna want all that. You're gonna wanna run to Target right now, or you're gonna wanna get on Rainbow Resource right now. So just stop looking. And the interesting thing about social media and blogs and YouTube is that it can be super helpful, because you can get really great ideas that you didn't know about before. But then on the other hand, you're now putting this info in your head of like what somebody's kids in Florida are doing, and it's just almost like too much information sometimes. So don't feel like your kids are missing out on something if they're not playing the same games that Bella and Jessie are playing in my homeschool favorites. Don't even click on my homeschool favorites if it's not, you know, if you don't have the budget for certain things. And that's actually one of the reasons that I went down to doing them once every quarter, is because I was almost purchasing things just to review them in my favorites when I was doing them monthly, and I didn't want to do that anymore because I was putting that strange pressure on our budget as well. So don't even look at stuff unless it's something like, if you specifically need ideas for a unit study, then by all means go look that up. But if you just click on something because, you know, you want to pass the time, next thing you know, you've got 5 new things on your wish list, and that's just never a good thing. So number 2, my next tip, because oftentimes you are wanting to purchase homeschool curriculum at the end of a school year, or during the summer, you have like maybe 2 months to purchase curriculum versus purchasing them throughout the year. So what I do is I watch sales, of course, and watch websites and use curriculum things, and if I see something that I know I'm gonna want, I'll grab it right then. But otherwise, a really good tip for anything that you're budgeting for is just to pull out an extra $10 every time you're at the grocery store. So I grocery shop once a week. $10 cash tacked on to my weekly grocery budget isn't usually that big of a deal. And then I have these like just random, you know, $40 to $50 a month that I'm tucking away for our homeschool. Those are, that's cash that we can use for field trips or for supplements, things that aren't necessarily necessary, or it can be saved to purchase curriculum when that's necessary. So that's a good tip, is just to pull out small amounts of cash, because that builds up over time. And I know that some of you have like a dollar amount that you set aside in your monthly budget, which is awesome, but we've never done that because I don't necessarily like do all of my purchasing at one time. It's a little bit more here and there, so this little system works out well for us. The next thing is to take advantage of memberships, and memberships do seem costly because it's like, you know, $100 for a botanical garden membership or $100 for a museum membership. But for my family with 4 kids and myself, to get into our botanical garden one time would be $60. So the membership pays for itself in the sense of if I go 2 or more times, we've paid for it. But what having a membership does is it makes me a little bit more rooted, and I kind of stick those things out, and I don't wander around too much and spend too much extra money. So say we have a Zoo membership one year, which we did last year. Generally, I'm going to try to plan a few unit studies, a few field trips around having that Zoo membership. If we didn't have that Zoo membership, we might go up to the zoo one day and then go to an aquarium another day. Well, we're not studying sea or marine life, so we kind of just wasted money versus utilizing that membership and using it to benefit our homeschool by sticking to it throughout the year. So you do end up saving money in that sense because you're wanting to get out of the house, you're wanting your kids to get hands-on experience, you're wanting them to have some field trip opportunities. And so instead of having to spend excessive amounts of money on field trips throughout the year, if you have a membership somewhere, you can visit that one location multiple times, kind of plan more around that, and it actually ends up being very beneficial. For us, we've always had a botanical garden membership, and when we didn't in the past, and we would just go visit one time, we'd kind of just go and see everything there was to see quickly. As soon as we became members, now my kids are taking advantage of certain field guides that they have available, or we'll just go visit and we'll just go look at this certain plant life or this section of the garden, and they actually become more acquainted with that garden, and it is well worth the membership. Next is following the trends. And this is something that I mean, you guys know that I've fallen into that trap multiple times here, and then I've had to come back and say, okay, I was just following a trend. We really didn't end up liking that curriculum after all, or like loop scheduling. We tried loop scheduling this last year and it just wasn't right for us. Even though there was nothing broken, there was no reason for us to change it. But following the trends can be a really big money pit in your homeschool, because a lot of times trends mean purchasing new supplies, new curriculum, new supplements. So for example, we love Poetry Tea Time, but initially when I started looking at Poetry Tea Time, I wanted to invest in all new poetry books. I wanted to buy a ton of new, like nice, or even like Goodwill mugs, tea mugs. I wanted to look at different teas. I wanted to look at different, at the time I wanted like to get a pan to make madeleines with my daughter, like all sorts of random stuff. So now this idea of bringing Poetry Tea Time into our homeschool meant $150 investment, which was silly. But there's all sorts of trends that kind of do that to us, where my kids don't mind. They still get the same amount of excitement pulling down mix match coffee mugs and the random tea cups that we have that aren't broken, and pulling out books that we love or printing them off. So it really is more of like an us thing. We're trying to follow this trend. It's visually appealing, it's beautiful, it's this new homeschool thing. The same thing goes for nature study, which is awesome. I'm glad everybody's doing nature study, but we don't have to dive in and purchase all the nice supplies and grab all the things before we even know if that's something that works well for our family. So following the trends can be pricey, especially if it's curriculum style, or just a new curriculum that everybody's wanting to try. Suddenly you're scrapping years of investment in other curriculum and you're purchasing new stuff, and that's just not worth your while many times. Next is probably one you've heard a ton, which is to avoid printing costs just because you think that buying the PDF version of something would be cheaper. So that's a difficult one, because sometimes the PDF version is much cheaper, but when you really count how much it's going to cost you to print the whole thing, it's very expensive. There's two things about this. One, I generally, for example, with our Using Language Well and our Spelling Wisdom, I've purchased level 1 once, I've purchased level 2 once, and my kids will just, because those don't have to be done on the worksheets, my kids will just copy the prompts out of their book onto their own composition notebook, which is fine. The other thing about that is that you may not always be doing every single page in that workbook. So instead of maybe printing it all at once, if you have the self-control to print things on time and it won't get you too far off schedule, just print what you need as you need it, so it's not as expensive all up front. Say you bought a nature journal, that's $100, or that's 100 pages. Don't buy a nature journal, that's $100. and you really, by the end of the school year, you've only done nature study twice a month. You only needed 24 of those pages. So you could have wasted a lot of money in printing costs. So be mindful of that. Sometimes it is more cost effective to just buy it already printed. All right, next is to invest in curriculum. And this one means a lot to me because when we first started homeschooling, I really wanted to use certain curriculum that was costly. And so I was very careful to preserve that, to not waste it, to take care of it. And now, years later, now that we do have the stockpile curriculum, and now that we're in a better place financially than we were when we had, you know, little ones, when we were newly married, I still honor that because I remember what that felt like to be a young mom desiring to homeschool and not sure how it was going to work in our budget. I remember saving for things. I remember being so excited when they came in the mail, and just because that might not be our current struggle, I mean, it always could be again, but just because that's not where we're at right now in this season of life doesn't mean that I want to ever lose that respect for how much time it took to save for those things, how much effort it took. And it's just a good habit to, you know, respect the amount of work that goes into purchasing things and to not just toss them or let the kids, you know, ruin them. So investing in things that you can pass down for years, manipulatives that you can pass down for years, and just taking care of the curriculum is really such an important tip for staying within a budget. Again, you can always just use the pages and either photocopy them if that's allowed for your own family, or have your kids just answer the prompts on their own paper, or, you know, you can use them, but if there's something that has reusable manipulatives and things like that, and just repurchase the workbook later on. So a lot of times investing in the full curriculum is worth it, and then you're not spending more time purchasing things that are disposable or repurchasing certain levels of things later on. Let's see, what is my next tip? Oh, swap things. My brother homeschools right now, but even before he started homeschooling, my girlfriends and I would swap picture study portfolios because, you know, if we'd done it one year, I'm not going to do that one again for at least 3 years. We've swapped science books. Like if multiple families are using Apologia, there's no reason to purchase a new textbook every year. If, you know, they have that one and you have this one, it's no problem to swap and borrow things as long as you know they're going to take care of it. My brother and I just swapped Story of the World curriculum because he's on one level and I'm going to one that he's already done. So always offer or ask your friends if you know you'll take care of it, because there's some some books that I know my kids will really love and want to constantly look at that I'm like, yeah, we're gonna buy that one because I'm pretty sure my kids may rip that page eventually. Another option is to do a half and half year. So say you're coming right up to the beginning of a homeschool year and it's just not in your budget to purchase brand new science and brand new history curriculum and you're not finding it used. When I was in elementary school, I know that I don't know if it's still a common thing, but I know that, you know, when I was doing my student teaching, it was a normal thing to do history for half the year or social studies for half the year and science for half the year. So instead of doing 2 days a week of history and 2 days a week of science all year long, you're doing 2 days a week or 4 days a week of science in this semester and 4 days a week of history in this semester. And so that saves you 3 or 4 months before you need to purchase that science curriculum or that history curriculum. So if you're in a place where you can only buy one or the other, that's a good option as well. And there's other subjects that can work for. Handicrafts and nature studies, half and half, or whatever you need to do. But just be mindful that you can remove one and double up and then do the same thing in the second semester. Another thing is nature study versus science. If it's just not in the budget to do a full-fledged science curriculum, or you don't have the time to pull together your own science unit and also cannot purchase a science curriculum, nature study is a really good option for science, and you don't have to do both. So nature study is as simple as getting a field guide from the library, or even not having a field guide, but just letting the kids outside to do some research, look around, see what they see, bring a paintbrush or a pencil and some paper, and let their imaginations go to work and kind of follow their lead. And then you can quickly Google things, you can look things up, but it's a really good option for science, and I definitely recommend it even if it's not a budget kind of a thing. Again, you guys know to use the library, but just gonna throw that out there in case you've had too much information that you've forgotten those basics, which happens to me all the time. I'll be ordering things and be like, John, oh, my Amazon cart's like $150 in books and I can't choose which ones. And he's like, well, did you check the library? It's like, oh, right, the library. The next thing is to be aware of costly unit studies and curriculum with projects that cost a lot of money. So sometimes curriculum is very inexpensive. And when you start to look through it, you realize that the reason it's so inexpensive is because you're pulling a lot of the weight as far as the prep work and the cost and the projects that are involved. And also unit studies for me tend to be a money pit because either I don't do enough research or I'm just not that good at them. But I'm constantly purchasing supplements, doing projects, and buying all sorts of things that I don't necessarily already have on hand. I have some things on hand for bees, and I have a lot of beach stuff because that's where we live. But beyond that, any unit study we were to do, I would have to purchase or borrow a whole lot of materials. So be mindful of that as well. A good tip, especially if you're just starting out with homeschooling, is to buy the basics first and then the supplements after that, because the basics are the most important place to invest your money. So say you're needing to buy your math for the year, you're needing to buy your science for the year, or you're needing to buy your reading, writing, arithmetic, whatever. But the supplements are more of the fun things to buy. Like, I wanna buy this book, I wanna buy this project, I wanna buy this subscription plan. Those are not the most important places to spend your money. So if you are on a budget or you're wanting to cut down on your homeschooling cost, invest in the basics first and then add the supplements in as money becomes available for it or as you approach that. Because sometimes I'll buy stuff like, okay, and in January we're gonna do this, and in July we're gonna do this, and it's August and I don't need to be purchasing things for months and months and months ahead, but my personality is that I want to gather it all together. I waste a lot of money that way because half the time we don't even get to those studies or those supplements later on. Next is learning to be content with making wish lists instead of checking out. And those are for all my fellow Amazon mamas. I love the instant, like, oh, I want this, I'm gonna buy it. And that's wrong for many reasons, not only just like budget-wise, but I feel like we're losing that sense of delayed gratification. So I've recently begun being more mindful of making wish lists and being okay with that. And I think it has less to do for me with receiving the product and more to do with making sure that I don't forget that that's something that I want. And so making a wish list definitely satisfies that for me a little bit. But then the other thing is, oftentimes with 4 kids, we have a birthday every couple of months here, or a holiday or whatever, and everybody wants to know gift ideas. My kids, I don't know if they're just nerds or if they're pretending for my sake or whatever, but they love educational games, they love logic games, they love books, they love all of that. So they love receiving those things as gifts as well. So if I have a wish list, then oftentimes I'm killing 2 birds with 1 stone in the sense of I'm not just like buying for no reason, wasting tons of money. But then the other thing is I'm cutting down on the amount that's coming in my house, because if I'm buying all these things instead of adding them to my wish list, then I'm trying to come up with ideas for gifts. I'm ending up with twice the amount of stuff in my house, and I'm spending more than what needs to be spent, especially if you have family who is wanting to buy gifts for your kids. And then the last thing is to avoid those money pits, which for me would be like the Target dollar spot. I've probably been to the actual dollar store like 4 times in my life. So it's not, that's not a tough one for me, although I'm sure that if I became familiar with it, I would also spend tons of money in there. But for me, it's the Target dollar spot, or it's browsing the Amazon deals of the day. Those are the things that are my like big, especially if it's like an educational thing, I'm always justifying it, like quick justification. Like, oh, well, we're gonna need this, and if we don't need it now, we're gonna need it soon, and then I need to buy 4 of them because I have 4 kids and I want it to be fair, and next thing you know, that one thing that was $1 is now $4, or that one thing that was $3 is now $12, and I don't just buy one thing, so, you know, there's 5 different things I want, and I just spent whatever on it, like $15 on it, and it's like, wait a minute, that doesn't work. So those are my tips for staying within a homeschool budget, whatever budget you've set, or just not wasting money in your homeschool. Let me know in the comments below, please, what some of your top tips are for purchasing curriculum, staying within a budget, planning field trips, and all of that. I'm looking forward to being back next week. We're gonna talk about budgeting things like date nights, vacations, and all of those extras, the entertainment, extra things. Make sure you pop on over to Megan's channel to check out her video for today. And please give this video a thumbs up. Like I said in my last video, that really helps give me some feedback on the type of content you guys wanna see. And hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. See you guys soon.